On the Africa room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast with the women in the girls down with the guys. Spin not see black, leave right, fight. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. White. Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, Trump vibe in me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck the deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. Match bright and high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces over fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove right here on both of our channels and on X, episode 11 of Mets Hot Stove. Hopefully everybody is getting ready for probably one of the craziest weekends of the offseason, as hopefully we get some big news in regards to the top free agent on the market in about 48 hours, 24 hours, 72 hours, hopefully very shortly. We'll definitely get into that. We got an abundance of topics to get to so we can start this Friday off right. But before we get started, let's say it up to the main man to my left, right? There we go. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Rob. I got 6 words for you. I got 6 words and 6 words alone. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? Listen, man, what we saw go down on social media last night was pretty wild. If you haven't heard already, there's some speculation surrounding Carlos Mendoza's son potentially leaking what the Mets offer is for Juan Soto on TikTok, I believe it was. We'll get into it here in just a second. I thought that was actually hilarious, and everybody on X, was losing their minds over it. It was funny. So I know a lot of people are talking about that. Like even the major baseball reporters are talking about it on their shows and channels and all that good stuff. So you know what? Regardless of whether it's true or not, it looked pretty real to me. The decision is coming soon. We will find out where Juan Soto is going, presumably in the next couple of days. I would prefer for it to happen tomorrow because as soon as I'm done with this stream, I have to head out. So I'm going to be at a family member's house, and I don't really want to have to go live for an impromptu Juan Soto breakdown of him signing. And we can hopefully do that together tomorrow or Sunday, Rob. But you know what? We're on Juan Soto Watch all weekend. But again, outside of Juan Soto, we still have other topics to talk about. Brett Baty, Manaya, the starting pitching plan in general. If you missed my video on the channel, I dropped it earlier today. Check it out. It was a snippet of the live stream that I did with our main guy, Hector, last night. So I appreciate it. Let's go Mets. It should be a fun discussion.
Yeah, and I did watch your show yesterday with Hector. I couldn't comment because I was at work, but I was definitely listening for sure. And it was obviously a good show. Hector always brings it, no matter where he's at. He always brings the hammer down with anything he talks about. So Carlos Mendoza's son. I mean, would anybody be shocked if Carlos Mendoza's son had the correct offer? Unlike John Heyman, Rossi, or Rosenthal, and all this time it was Carlos Mendoza's son who broke the news. That would not shock me at all. Now, could this be true? Sure. I mean, Mendoza at the dinner table talking to his son. Obviously, Mendoza knows what's going on with the Soto situation, what the Mets offered, and maybe it was just a little bit of dinner table talk with his son. And his son is 11, 12 years old, so right in that age where he wants to know everything. He probably has a favorite player or two. I'm assuming Juan Soto is probably one of them. And the kid's curious. And, kids on social media are just, what they are. They're interactive. They will, comment on everybody's comment just because. And, is this something where the kid just said, screw you, I'm going to protect, back up my dad here and, his team? It could be something simple like that. And I know people took off and ran with it, and people were making, shorts and, posting on TikTok and everywhere, like, showing his comment. It was just crazy. And again, I honestly don't think anybody has any idea what the final offers are, or if there is final offers, if there's still going to be offers. Is Juan Soto just making a decision based on the offers that are known to him and Boris? Nobody really knows. Like, this has been a very secretive free agency period with Juan Soto, and it's been frustrating for the fans because, John Heyman in 3 days, and I talked about this on Mets Talk Live yesterday, John Heyman in 3 days had the Yankees the favorites, the Red Sox all in, and the Mets the clear-cut favorite in 3 days. In 3 days, 3 different opinions on Foul Territory, on MLB Network, and then again on another podcast. The guy cannot make up his mind. And we know John Heyman is the mouthpiece for Scott Boras, so it's clearly why he's doing it that way. And I don't think John Heyman actually knows exactly what is going on, except what Boras is feeding him to tell to the mass media and to the fans. I just see it as everybody needs to calm down, right? I don't think that anybody's the favorite. Look, there's somebody that probably has the biggest offer, and if you believe he's going to take the most money, he's going to go there. And if it's not the Mets, so be it. Like, at this point, this free agency period for Juan Soto breaks us down. Right? It gets boring at this point. It gets frustrating, and it takes out all the energy of what the offseason is supposed to be. And when we sign, you know what everybody, yes, there's going to be a fan base that's happy, but you know what everybody's going to do? Thank God, finally, right? Even if you didn't get him, because we want to move on to other things that's going to help your team and our team. And that's what this free agency start has become. It's been a frustrating, opinion-based free agency so far with Juan Soto. And honestly, I'm sick and tired of it. If we get him, great. We can, laugh at the Yankee fans who said he was never leaving there. And the Mets finally get a big-name position player that everybody seems that Steve Cohen completely misses out on since he's been owner of the New York Mets. And, everybody's going to be like, why have that money if you can't land the big guy, the Yamamotos of the world, the Springers, the Correas, now Juan Soto? It's going to be that talk, right? I mean, you can't put a gun to a player's head and say, you better come here, right? Juan Soto has a decision to make. If it's not the Mets, it's probably not Steve Cohen's money. It's just that he wanted to go elsewhere. You can't predict, or you can't force a player to go somewhere. But Chris, at this point, I just want the decision to be made, because I'm sick of it.
Yeah, it's a topic that drives us kind of crazy, coming up on here and talking about daily, but we do it because it's necessary. It's a necessary step to free agency, right? Anytime a generational player presents itself, we know that we're going to have these discussions, and we're going to have about 20 of them, 30 of them on our channel, right? It happened last year with Ohtani. It happened a little bit less because I feel like there was some, belief that the Mets could sign him, but then it kind of faded very quickly. And, it definitely wasn't nearly as much as this when the Mets are, really have a shot at these Soto sweepstakes. So again, it could be tiring, but it's necessary. At the end of the day, it kind of is entertaining for me at the end of the day. I know it's entertaining for a lot of Mets fans and, Boston Red Sox fans who are in on Juan Soto, right? The Yankees fans, Blue Jays fans who think that they have a shot from the outside. Listen, the reports keep on changing as well. That's something that it's important to note, right? Last week, it was a reporting week full of steam towards the Boston Red Sox. And, within the past couple of days, at the very minimum, we've seen this shift in terms of all these reporters sort of just changing their tune. The Mets and Juan Soto are starting to gain steam. We haven't seen that shift yet for the Yankees, really. And really, the Yankees, I guess the reports surrounding the Yankees is that they will, they have the chance because, they might go up to that $700 million figure, but also they already have the advantage of Juan Soto knowing that organization well enough to be like, okay, I believe in that vision and I believe in that destination. That's where I want to be and end my career as a New York Yankee. So that's really the advantage. I see a lot of Yankees fans on the timeline kind of clinging to that fact, which is fine, right? Everybody in each fan base is going to have their own opinion and their own talking points of why Juan Soto should join their team. Mets fans have theirs, Red Sox fans have theirs, and Yankees fans have theirs. That's the beauty of sports. And this doesn't just come down to Juan Soto. This is any big name free agent across all of sports. So I enjoy engaging in that discussion. But at the end of the day, we have to also just take a look at are there any objective reports that we could actually go off of right now? I'm not sure if it was Heyman or somebody else that said everybody that was in on Juan Soto is still in on him and up to $700 million in their, final, bid at this point, minus the Dodgers, is what I heard. Again, because we're talking about this, we're hearing 10 different things at once. It's hard for us to decipher what's true versus what's not, because there are a lot of credible people talking about this, right? And there's still among these credible people differences in what is being reported. And so that's what makes it hard for us. So from what I've heard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but what I've heard is that everybody probably meaning the Blue Jays, Red Sox, Mets, and Yankees are up to $700 million and that they would be willing to go that far. The Dodgers are not. They might be bringing a guy like Teoscar Hernandez and re-signing him and having that be their bat. Their big bat in the outfield. And then the Phillies, right? A team, and we shouldn't have even mentioned the Phillies, and that was a mistake just a second ago for even mentioning the Phillies, but it's kind of fun to just kind of poke fun at them. The fact that they didn't even meet with Juan Soto. There was speculation that they were going to actually meet with him. They never even actually met with Juan Soto from what I heard. So again, a lot of different reports. I think it's annoying and I'm ready for this to be over. But again, it's a necessary step to get this free agency rolling.
Correct. And that's the problem with the baseball free agency. It has to take the big name free agent to come off the boards so everything else can start rolling, right? Nobody's going to sign Anthony Santander until Juan Soto's off the board, because all the teams that are quote unquote still in it for Juan Soto can pivot to Anthony Santander if they don't get Juan Soto. That's the frustrating thing. And I believe Hector, who's in the chat right now, he said it the other day on one of his shows that, why aren't, about the Mets, why aren't they going after starting pitching when really nobody else is? Why don't you just go get your guy? I think it's the same concept. I think, even though I don't necessarily believe one interacts with the other, I feel like the top name pitchers are still not going to be signed anywhere until Juan Soto signs. I think it's like a trickle-down effect. And not necessarily think I agree with Hector. I think the Mets should just go after, if they want Burns or Fried, give him a competitive offer and see what he does, right? But I don't think those players and that agent is Boris. So, I mean, they could be talking about Juan Soto, Burns, and Anthony Santander in the same meeting, and that's the other thing that, when you have the same agent with multiple top free agents, guess what's going to happen? Boris is going to talk to teams about that specific player, and I doubt he's going to talk about other guys. I think he's not going to help one to hurt the other.
You think so, though? You think that there's not a meeting where they have discussions about multiple? Because I don't know if I believe that.
I think there's a conversation, but I don't think they're getting into the depth of, like, if the meeting was supposed to be about Juan Soto, I don't think they're going to have a little PowerPoint presentation for Juan Soto, and they says, oh wait, but like a little final thanks for being here today, and then at the bottom says, hey, can we talk about Pete Alonso? I don't think it's going to be that direct, but I think it's going to be slight conversations like, hey, we're interested in this guy too, make sure you give us a phone call right after the Soto thing's over. I don't think Boris is that stupid. I truly believe that. Look, he's not talking about Burns with the Mets right now. I don't believe he is. If the Mets are involved in Burns or Fried, I don't think they're going hard after Boris talking about them. I just don't feel like that's what the teams are doing. I feel like there's a plan A involved for every team, and a lot of it involves around Juan Soto for the 5 teams that are supposedly all involved, and the Dodgers seem like they're kind of pushing away since rumors are they're going to try to resign or will resign Teoscar Hernandez. I just feel like teams are so worried about the price. Well, not worried, but know the price tag is going to hit $700 million, which is probably leading to $50 million. And I said this for a while. I think he was going to go past the Ohtani contract. I felt like that was going to be the case. And obviously the more years is, because he's younger.
Help, right.
Yeah. I just feel like teams are so afraid to move to a Corbin Burnes or an Anthony Santander, because what if they do really have a shot to sign Juan Soto, right? I think these teams believe they're in the lead, or they have the best shot of getting Juan Soto. And what if Juan Soto was going to pick your team, but you just signed Anthony Santander? What if the Mets sign Anthony Santander tonight at 6:00, and Juan Soto was ready to choose the Mets, and that news comes out? You're going to look like a fool. And I don't think teams want to look like a fool. And I think that's the big reason why they don't do it until the big fit goes.
Well, the position players are completely, I feel like, irrespective of what the Soto situation is, right? I mean, the Mets wouldn't be the Mets nor any team really in on Juan Soto is going to even touch any of the other players in terms of like asking about them. And again, even if the teams that aren't in on Juan Soto, yeah, they're probably trying to go ahead and make contact with Anthony Santander or Teoscar Hernandez, but you know what? Those players are going to be like, no, I'm waiting specifically for Juan Soto to sign, so you're going to have to wait. And so, again, I think that with the New York Mets, I don't think Anthony Santander was the best example there. I think maybe a guy like Pete Alonso would be a better example in terms of, I personally think both of those guys can be signed by the New York Mets. It's going to be a whole lot of money. You're talking about $28 million, maybe $27 million for Pete. I firmly believe that. And then upwards of 50 for Juan Soto. So that's a big chunk of change for two guys. And a lot of people are kind of wondering like, well, what's going to happen with Pete? But even Pete Alonso, his market is going to be set, and it's going to, I guess, snowball, right? And we're going to hear more things about Pete Alonso, even if he's not an outfielder, right? So like, forget Anthony Santander and Teoscar Hernandez, like even the other free agents in terms of Alex Bregman, in terms of Willy Adames, in terms of Pete Alonso, right? They have to wait because there are certain teams, right? The Dodgers being one, the Mets being the other, and maybe the Yankees, right? A couple of other teams perhaps that are able to dish out big money for multiple big bats, right? But a lot of teams, right? If they are in one of the big free agent bats and in Pete Alonso, Willy Adames, whatever, that's probably going to be their only signing, right? They're not going to go out and be in on multiple big free agent bats. So again, it's all about money allocation and payroll allocation for these teams, and that's why we are seeing the holdup. And I think everybody knows that. I think that we are just stating the obvious in that fact. But I also think on the other side of things, pitching is a little bit different in terms of you can still be doing your due diligence in this market. We just saw the Oakland Athletics sign Sevy to a $67 million deal. So we've seen the Mets sign Montas to a $34 million deal. You can do things and engage in conversations and potentially lock a pitcher down without knowing the decision of Juan Soto, right? And I think that's what Hector's saying in the chat. I think that's what a lot of other people are also wondering in terms of why there's no movement on the Mets starting pitching front, because as we stated in our live chat yesterday, or our live stream, is that this rotation as it currently stands is just simply unacceptable. And again, there's no reason to panic. Even though Luis Severino's off the board, I know you spoke about it in your stream, I talk about it in my stream, there's no reason to panic. John Manaea denied the Oakland Athletics. He's still out there for the taking, and he's still out there for the ability to re-sign for the New York Mets. And I do have my doubts at this point, and we'll get into it in terms of what David Stearns' starting pitching plan is. But you know what? There's going to be opportunities galore for the New York Mets to go out there and sign multiple starting pitchers just like they need to. 2, maybe even 3 at this point, depending on what their actual plan is. But what I wanted to ask you as we're on the Juan Soto conversation, I think a lot of people want to know is that, let's say this, and again, I know it's kind of a stupid topic, but it's kind of important also to talk about, is that we haven't seen the Mets really leak anything, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of other teams that also haven't really leaked anything, which is a good job on their part too. But if this report of Carlos Mendoza's son taking to TikTok and responding to a Boston Red Sox fan that he needs to give up the dream of the Red Sox signing Juan Soto because his dad said this is what the Mets offer is and they're getting him, does that hurt the Mets' chances? Would you think that hurts the Mets' chances, or do you think that doesn't mean anything at all? Because I don't think it means anything at all.
No, I don't think it means anything at all, but I think there's some type of factual situation with Carlos Mendoza's son. Like, why would 11 and 12-year-olds say that? If out of nowhere, like, who says 15 years, $700 million? Like, who would just come out and say that? Like, I truly believe that, Carlos Mendoza's sitting down, eating dinner with his son and his family. And the conversation came up and the kid was curious. Mendoza's like, yeah, we offered him that. He didn't, do you really think his son's going to go to TikTok and, shut up a Red Sox fan and say, what, the Mets offered him this much and he's going to the Mets? Now, it could be completely wrong. And, the kid was just being a jerk and, just trying to protect his dad and the team that he manages. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't even know anymore. Like, I'm speechless with it now because it just, I don't know what to believe anymore. Like, and that's the problem, right? You used to go on Twitter or, open the paper, many years ago and, see a beat reporter, right? Mets signed Carlos Beltran, stuff like that. A couple of years ago, Mets gave the extra year to Max Scherzer, boom, right away. The reporters only about 3 years ago were almost in on everything. And it was factual stuff that was coming out. And you can at least, have a little bit of hints here or there where you have idea of what teams are really offering what. Like this secretive crap, I don't think goes well, and I don't think it bodes well for the fans or Major League Baseball as a whole, because people can easily stop caring until something actually happens, right? Everybody's like, oh, don't believe anything until the passing bomb comes out. Like, that's not. How can you only have one reporter that everybody's waiting for? It's so stupid.
It's both sides of the coin too. It's the reporters' fault because they want to get the initial scoop. If you look at a guy like Will Salmon, or if you look at a guy like Jeff Passan, why they're so credible, or maybe even Ken Rosenthal, why they're so credible is that they already have the reputation of people can trust me, and so I will just wait and not make myself look like an absolute fool. The other reporters are just trying to get up to that status, and I don't blame them for doing it. But the other flip side of the coin is that these agents and these players are benefiting from it because, again, you can use these teams' bids against each other, especially if they're not leaking, accurately leaking, because there should be a little bit of a caveat there, accurately leaking to the public, right? Because the teams inevitably get a wind of that and they're like, oh, well, we're just being used, right? If you keep things close to yourself, and you keep these reports, these cards to yourself, right? Like these agents and players like to do, they're only benefiting from that. So again, we can't necessarily just blame the reporters. They're trying to make a come up just like these players are, right? In terms of their careers and their money. So I get both sides of it for us that are stuck in the middle in terms of the fan bases and just the overall fan bases of people in the chat and us talking about this without any insider knowledge. Like it's frustrating for us too. But again, there's a little bit of blame to go around for everybody, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's to blame. Like we know Boris has mouthpieces, and the established reporters who have clout are people are going to, some are going to believe more than others, guys who have that ton of experience, and, guys who not have done enough, like you said, Chris, are trying to get that big scoop, Carlos Berger a couple of years ago with the Correa thing, that I know that's a player, but still, one of the Spanish reporters, we're talking about the Mets a week ago, so it's, I don't know, like, I know they're trying to get their come up, and I don't, fault them for doing that. I just feel like there's a better way to go about it, because at the end of the day, Boris can go to each and every team and says, look, this is the highest offer. Are you going to match it? Right. So they don't need the media to do that. That's what I don't understand. Right. It's not like any team or Scott Boras can't call any GM that's involved in Soto and say, this is the highest offer. You don't need John Heyman to go on foul territory and speak on the podcast to say what you need to be said about your client. You don't need that. Like, they don't have to do that, right? You can send a text. Like, it's just that simple. So I think that baseball should just make it a few weeks where people can sign. I know it has to do with the CBA and the union and all that, but I think it's easier to solve that issue instead of, it shouldn't take 3 weeks or a month since the World Series was over to make a decision. I mean, it's so stupid. Like, the offers. How about this? Lock them in a hotel room with every team that's involved and let them come out with a hat on. Like, do a college edition stuff where they choose their team. Right? It's just so annoying, and I don't think it benefits anybody. I really don't.
Rob, in terms of progressing this conversation into something like, Mets discussion here, I had this it wasn't really a debate. It was just sort of a talking point with Hector as well, about who you think is leading the charge in this Soto effort for the Mets. Is it Steve Cohen? Because we all know Boris and Cohen go way back. It's been reported that Cohen quite literally hangs out with Scott Boras whenever he's in town in Los Angeles, and they always get together, have dinner, or whatever. Like, just keeping that open, established relationship, because clients are going to come and go for Boras, and the opportunity is going to be there for the New York Mets. Or do you think David Stearns is leading this charge?
I think this one's Steve Cohen. I think this is his baby here. Like, I think he's going to let Stearns do everything else with the starting pitching and maybe even Pete Alonso or, somebody else. I think that Steve Cohen I think the same thing last year with Yamamoto. I think this was all Steve Cohen driven. I don't think this was Stearns driven at all. I truly believe that. I think the top of the market guy, I think, is all about Steve Cohen, right? Why do you need David Stearns to talk to Steve Cohen and say, hey, can we give him $700 million? Steve Cohen and be in a room saying, listen, what do you want? I think it's an easier path to getting the guy or trying to get the guy you want. So, I don't think David Stearns is leading the charge for Juan Soto. Because everybody knows that 2025, and this is why it's getting frustrating. 2025 is supposed to be the year the Mets go for it. This is what we've been told by reporters, by the team itself, the organization. This was the year that they were going for it. And Steve Cohen even talked about it. So,
all right, hold on 1 second, Rob. I have to interrupt you here. So, I see Jeff in the chat. I'm kind of just trying to follow along here. You see this burner account here that everyone's talking about on Twitter?
Which one?
Well, there's a burner account. Basically, everyone thinks it's Anthony DeComo. It's like Anthony 830-89466 saying, I'm posting this on a burner account so I do not get anyone in trouble. Take this with a grain of salt. 15 for $745 million on a creative deal with opt-outs included. Juan Soto to the Mets. I'm told the announcement will be Sunday. Again, I don't know. And Anthony DeComo literally just tweeted from his regular account saying, one more baseball night in New York to end your week, the last one before Juan Soto signs with a question mark. I think people are grasping to straws here. Everyone's under his account saying, we know you have a burner account. I don't know, man. This is getting ridiculous at this point. Why would he tweet from a burner account and say that the only reason I'm tweeting from a burner is to not get in trouble?
DeComo is definitely not that guy, right? I've seen him many times. I know Hector probably seen him many times at the Queens Baseball Convention and other, around Citi Field and all that. DeComo is not that guy, right? He's not that. I can assure you he's not that. You saw the thing about John Heyman? I don't know where he said this. I don't know if he tweeted it or one of the shows where he said with the Mets, the issue could be the roster around them. He said could be the roster around them. No one to bat behind him in the lineup. They need to up their offer. I don't know where he said that, but I know he was quoted as saying that. But like, huh? Like, come on. Like, seriously. I just, what does that mean? What does that really mean, right? The Mets are trying to get better, right? And this is why I talk about people around the league about Pete Alonso. I don't think people believe that Pete Alonso is a guy that the way Met fans bring Pete Alonso up, I don't think players around the league believe that. And now this can be wrong, but if this is factual and Juan Soto doesn't like the players around him right at this moment in the Mets lineup, say if they do sign Pete Alonso, and that's what the Mets say, hey, we're going to sign Pete Alonso, you, him, Lindor, Nimmo, Alvarez, Vientos. And, you would think that Pete Alonso might be batting around behind him or something like that. I don't believe, and maybe this is not true, but Chris, I want to get your opinion about this situation. If this quote is true and Juan Soto doesn't like him, because, Lindor is going to be leadoff, Nimmo is probably going to bat fifth. You would think Alonso would probably bat behind Juan Soto, right? If that's the case. What is your thought about the lineup if Juan Soto and Pete Alonso are in the same lineup?
I would bet Pete Alonso before Juan Soto because pitchers would have to throw to Pete Alonso because they know Juan Soto's on deck and they know that they can't walk Pete Alonso, right? Or at least risk walking him. And then they know that Juan Soto will walk if you don't give him anything to hit. Like, he will walk. His OBP is damn near 450. So I think it makes sense to bat Pete Alonso before Juan Soto because maybe, just maybe, Pete Alonso could get the strength to not chase at a down and out slider because teams know that they can afford to walk him, but they know that they won't because he's just going to chase that pitch. I would bet Pete Alonso 1000% in front of Juan Soto. I don't care what anyone else says. Of course, we're going to have differences in opinions. A lot of people might say, bet Juan Soto 2 and Pete Alonso 3 or vice versa. Again, I'm sticking with this. Lindor, Vientos, Alonso, Soto, Nimmo. That's my top 5. And then Marte would probably be 6 if he sticks around this offseason. I'm just going to say it right now. Pete Alonso needs to have that guy behind him because, again, if pitchers don't want to walk Pete Alonso, they're not going to want to walk Juan Soto. And that's already automatically 2 bases given up right there. That's my opinion anyways.
Yeah, I think Juan Soto's batting second for the Mets. I think he's batting second for every team, right? Even Juan Soto, you would think would bat behind Aaron Judge, right? Everybody talked about that. Like, why don't you put Aaron Judge in front of Juan Soto and, just to, have him get better looks and better at-bats, even though Judge is really good during the season. And he ended up batting second. I think Juan Soto likes to bat second, and I think that's where he's going to bat. I don't think the Mets are going to play games with that. I think they're going to put him in second, and then it's going to be Alonso, and then it's going to be Vientos. Look, I like Vientos in the 2-hole, but because that's where he was really good, and he thrived in the 2-hole. But I think Juan Soto is. I think Juan Soto looks good in the 2-hole only because the fact that. His on base percentage, he can drive in runs as well, but I just feel like Juan Soto is really good in the 2-hole. Like I said, I wouldn't be mad with your lineup either. Like I said, Juan Soto can bat anywhere 1 through 4, and I'm very okay with that.
No, I agree with you. But how many discussions over the past 2 seasons, especially on our live streams and podcasts, have we talked about Pete Alonso just absolutely failing at, with runners in scoring position? I mean, anybody can go pull the receipts on both of our channels. And even on the Baseball Reference page, when you take a look at the splits with runners in scoring position, Pete Alonso has not been that guy in terms of producing at a consistent rate. Yes, the RBIs have been there generally, right? Generally.
Sure.
Even though this past season was a little bit of a down RBI season for Pete Alonso. So if you want to just bank on Pete Alonso going back to form of 2022 in terms of, driving runners in, sure. But why not give him a little bit of extra help in terms of getting pitches to hit by putting Juan Soto behind him? That's really my philosophy. So I do agree. If you have that top 5, that's automatically a great top 5 no matter how you spin it. Obviously, I think Lindor is going to be continuing to lead off. I don't think there's any reason to pull him from that situation. But between Vientos, Soto, and Alonso, I mean, you can really just go any sort of route and put any combination out there. But I will say what makes me the most comfortable in terms of the most efficiency that we can see out of a lineup is Alonso, Soto, Nimmo. So, but I hear you with the 2 spot with Soto because it sets up theoretically Pete Alonso for success with runners on base.
Correct. Here's the other thing too, right? What if that quote is correct? Right? If Juan Soto really likes to bat second, maybe that quote is correct. Maybe he don't like the people around him, and that directly involves Pete Alonso, right? Again, this is a guy that has struggled with runners in scoring position, and I said his numbers has been very much padded throughout the years. If you really go dive deep, Chris, you did a video on this and we talked about this. It wasn't just this year. This goes back years, right? This is something players see. This is something like Juan Soto looks at. And if that quote is correct with John Heyman, Juan Soto has a gripe because why do I want Pete Alonso batting in front of me or behind me? How is that helping me? Right. And I know that Juan Soto, can help other players, but we keep on talking, right? Pete Alonso, and there's people in the chat that know Pete Alonso has RBIs and drove in runs without protection in the lineup. So is that an excuse now when he had a bad season? Oh, he didn't have protection? Because the Mets tried to do it with JD Martinez. They did it with Vientos for a little while as well. Pete Alonso still sucked in those situations. And I'm not saying those guys are Juan Soto, but I just feel like, are you playing with fire in this aspect with Juan Soto, right? If you're telling Juan Soto, hey, we're going to sign Pete Alonso, we're just waiting for you to make your decision. We're going to sign Pete Alonso. If that doesn't excite Juan Soto, then guess what? Juan Soto is not going to be a New York Met. And this is why I'm saying if you want to keep on bringing back the same players and you go back to your losing lineups all over again, because no matter what you think about Lindor, Nimmo, McNeil, Alonso, they have not done enough winning. And that revolves and that goes in the circle of baseball and the players. They see that, right? The way Met fans see Pete Alonso, I can guarantee you players around the league don't see Pete Alonso in the same ilk as Met fans do. And I think that's part of what Juan Soto is talking about, if that's true.
I don't think it's true at all. I'm gonna shut that down right now. I don't think it's true at all. I don't think it's true at all. And I'm not saying Pete Alonso had a great season last year. Again, I called Pete Alonso out multiple times, as have you, right? But again, there's no chance that Juan Soto is saying, first of all, there's no chance he said that in general. But also, when you take a look at the differences in the Mets and the Yankees lineup, who do the Yankees have? What do they have realistically outside of Aaron Judge? That lineup sucks too. That lineup is awful.
But Juan Soto got traded to the Yankees. Right? If he signs back with the Yankees, then we have a gripe to say, well, who's in the Yankees lineup besides Aaron Judge? Right? But he got traded there. That's a different story. Like if he signed with the Yankees, and now became a free agent, then I could say, all right, then that argument is out the window. But if he signs with the Red Sox, right? Can you really say, is there a Devers on this team? Is there a Duran on this team? Maybe. I mean, you could say Lindor for sure, but I mean, I think some people think Devers is probably better overall than Lindor, which, I think is closer than some people might think. But again, it goes back to the same thing. What is Juan Soto thinking here? Because, again, does anybody believe Nimmo's a top 10 player? No, right? Lindor,
I would last season, though. I mean, Rob, it just seems like you're trying to discredit what the Mets just did. I mean, they just went to an NLCS for crying out loud when Brandon Nimmo had a terrible year and Pete Alonso had a down year. So, they just got to the NLCS.
I agree, but I'm not talking about what I'm thinking. I'm talking about the Juan Soto situation and what he's thinking, right? Because we all know that we had a lot of guys step up this year. Right, we had Lindor have an MVP season. Right, we had Shomania Severino, who had a complete bounce back and have a season that nobody thought they would have. There's a lot of guys here that and these guys aren't on the team right now. So these are guys that are not here. So there was a lot of was it a lot of great play from this team? Yeah, a lot of guys stepped up, but there are also a lot of guys not on this team anymore either. At least at this moment. So, and if you really look at it, right now, the lineup is what it is. Say if right now Alonso's not there, say if you do sign Juan Soto, and I do think Juan Soto directly relates to Pete Alonso. I think if you get Juan Soto, they're signing Pete Alonso. I think that is too relatable. And they were talking about this and on WFAN right now with Evan Robertson, Tiki Barber, that if the Mets don't get Juan Soto, there's more of a chance that Pete Alonso is not going to be on this team. I think they're going to go.
I said that like 2 weeks ago. I'm pretty sure.
That's why I brought it up, Chris, because they can go a totally different route. They can do Adames Santander, move Vientos to first base. I know a lot of people might not like that, but that's another way that they might go about it. And I don't know. I just feel like Juan Soto's going to the biggest offer. I don't think he really, all these teams are probably, except for I think the Red Sox were a playoff team. So, it's
Blue
not like
Jays were not. Blue Jays were not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But other than that, they're playoff teams, right? 3 out of the 5 were playoff teams. And so, it seems like those 3 teams or at least 2 of the teams are the favorites, the Mets and the Yankees, and then he put the Red Sox. But I don't see, that's the thing. Does Juan Soto want to go to a team where he can put them on to the next level? Because again, we all believe that the Yankees, if they sign Juan Soto, they're not doing nothing else. So if those quotes are correct with John Heyman and Juan Soto, then he's contradicting himself going back to the Yankees because the Yankees ain't doing much more in the lineup.
That's why it's not true. That's why it's not true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I brought it up.
And this is, and I see what you're, I see the path that you were going down. But what I will say, this is how I'll break it down, right? Dodgers are not in it. Let's just eliminate that. I do not think the Dodgers are in it. So let's just break this down. Dodgers aren't in it. He's not going to Toronto. I mean, I'm sorry, Toronto Blue Jays fans. If you happen to be watching this, I mean, it's just not going to happen. I mean, the destination factor is not there. He's not going to Toronto. They can offer him the moon and he's not going there. So again, maybe the 0.1% chance actually happens and they offer him $850 because that's what probably it would have to take for him to go there. But let's just say it's between the 3 teams that we think it is, right? The Red Sox, the Yankees, and the Mets. None of those teams, neither the Red Sox or the Yankees, are going to outbid the Mets. I think that we've had solidified reports already stating that. And we don't even need reports to deduce that with who Steve Cohen is. Mm-hmm. And you take a look at the situations of both of those teams. Yes, the Yankees just made the World Series, and I'm not going to get into the X's and O's and try to discredit, how and why they made the World Series, but let's be objective that they didn't have the toughest path to get there. And let's take a look at the team situations for both of these respective teams. In terms of the lineup, because if we want to talk about Heyman's BS quote about that, which just seems like a Scott Boras, again, exactly. to sort of, get back to Steve Cohen and say, hey, give me some more money, buddy. This is a situation where the Mets, even without having some of the guys that really stepped up for them, and mainly I'm talking about Jose Iglesias from the lineup perspective. Yes, the pitching situation is a little bit different, but Heyman's quote, I didn't hear it, right? But I'm just going based off of what we're talking about and what you said it was with the lineup. The Mets lineup is better than both of those teams' lineups regardless. And that's even given the down years from Francisco Alvarez, a Starling Marte that was in and out the entire season, a bad start from Lindor before he turned it around as an MVP caliber player, and a year where Pete Alonso couldn't hit anything with runners in scoring position. So if you take all that into consideration, obviously we're expecting some progressions in 2025. I think that would be absolutely ridiculous if that quote was true. And I don't buy it at all.
Yeah, and I also want to debunk something as well. Somebody's like, that Soto's going to take less money to go elsewhere. He would have signed already if he wanted to take less money to go to the Yankees or somewhere else, right? That's obvious. I mean, if he wanted to be a Yankee, he would be a Yankee already. And he would take a little bit less money to go back to the Yankees, because all reports and whatever you want to believe about reports, some believe that the Yankees have the smallest offer out of the teams that's still involved. So if he really wants to be a Yankee and the Yankees are number 3 in total offer, why wouldn't he just sign there already and take $30 million less or whatever it might be? Right? Because I even think $5 million, he's not going to do it. I'm sorry. You don't say no to $400+ million and wait all these years when teams are trying to extend you when they got you, the Padres and the Yankees, to get to free agency and take $5 million less. He would have been a Yankee already. That's why I believe that it's more likely he's a Red Sox or a Met than he is a Yankee, in my opinion, Chris. I don't know if you agree with that.
I said from the start, the Yankees really aren't the biggest threat, in my opinion, to the Mets. It's the Red Sox. And I said that again, like a couple weeks ago. So it is what it is at this point. I think that the one thing that we can confidently say, I'm pretty positive at this point, is that we can just deduce it to those three teams. And the prayer that the Yankees organization, Yankees fans are holding on to is the familiarity factor and the pairing with Aaron Judge. But again, if you're Juan Soto on the flip side, and you know that you're going to take up a lot of that payroll with Hal Steinbrenner openly stating the Yankees might not get back to $300 million, at least not in the foreseeable future, does that make you feel good?
Yeah, that's the thing. And the American League is only going to get better. Like, it was terrible last year, but, the Tigers are an up-and-coming team. The Red Sox are trying to get better. Even if they don't get Soto, you think they're going to do more. There is teams, that are getting better in the American League. So even though it's still a subpar league to the National League, but, he could be looking at it that way too. But, so much Juan Soto talk. We spoke 45 minutes about Juan Soto already, and we didn't even get to topic number 2 yet.
Wait. Hold on 1 second. I have one final question in terms of this Juan Soto situation here. Hypothetically speaking, and I'm sorry I have to ask this, and I want to get your thoughts on it, as well as the chats. If you're the Mets, and let's just say that Juan Soto, you're able to persuade Juan Soto to come to the New York Mets, but let's just say that Juan Soto states, I need something better behind me than Pete Alonso. Again, I don't think that's true at all. Again, please bear with me here. Would you then make the promise to Juan Soto to say, no problem, wait 1 season, we'll get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. next offseason? He's an unrestricted free agent. You can have him fill in at first base. You'll have a season to go through and wait. Again, it's like a dream scenario, but you have to imagine that discussion comes up.
It probably did. And this is why the Willy Adames rumors are probably more real than we originally think early in the offseason. Because I think that the Mets believe, and this is not, fake news or anything like that. I believe that Vientos can go to first base. I think that was a real report. And even DeComo said this. A couple of guys said it, like Mets beat reporters said it in regards to Vientos, that the Mets believe that he can go to first base. And that's why the Willy Adames check-in from the Mets is real. And it's not that you're replacing Pete Alonso with Willy Adames. It's just the fact that there is a real discussion about Pete Alonso and his run production with runners in scoring position. That has been a career problem for Pete Alonso. And this is not saying that I like Adames over Pete Alonso. If I had to choose one, I will choose Pete Alonso every single day over Adames. But realistically speaking here, could you move Vientos to first base, with his 30+ home runs and get Willy Adames at third base? Yeah, I think that can, and wait for Guerrero, and then you'll have to decide what you're gonna do. Is Adames gonna go to second base, or there's a lot of different options there to talk about. I mean, a lot of moving parts, but still, that can definitely be a possibility. The Mets could have Guerrero in their sights. He's younger, he puts up good numbers. Again, I think this is a Pete Alonso bias for a lot of people. I think they're still fixated that the Mets can't be good without Pete Alonso, which is hilarious to me. And I think that's the issue that Met fans are going to be running into. The same thing, I don't think it was necessarily the DeGrom thing, right? There were so many Met fans that were heartbroken over DeGrom when DeGrom hasn't pitched. Like, you're going to pay a guy that much money because, he was a homegrown Met and he had great seasons for you, a couple of Cy Young years? Yeah, great. But he didn't pitch over that time as well. And Pete Alonso has been a hell of a lot more healthier and, very productive. But you also got to understand, there's a lot of talk within baseball that Pete Alonso is not as good as everybody believes he is, especially Met fans. And I think that could be a realistic factor. The Mets could be against going after Guerrero next year, and they probably adamant about signing Pete Alonso. And maybe that doesn't, excite Juan Soto. And I'm sorry, guys, I am not going to sign Juan Soto because he don't want Pete Alonso. I'm sorry. If that's the breaking point for the New York Mets, then what the hell are we doing? What are we doing here? Juan Soto is a great player. I'm not stopping anybody from coming on this team to get Juan Soto. It doesn't matter to me. I'm sorry. I think that's crazy. Chris, maybe you think I'm crazy, but if Juan Soto says, I don't want Pete Alonso on this team, I want somebody else, you're gonna tell Juan Soto no?
Yeah, I'm not gonna tell him no. I'm not gonna tell him no.
I mean, come on, right? I mean, I'm sorry, it's not doing that, and I don't care if Juan Soto, Pete Alonso is a homegrown player. I just don't care. I really don't. If you can give me two other guys that can fill out this lineup a little bit better, and you stretch out the lineup a little bit more, it makes everybody else better. And look, this is not saying that my plan A is still Pete Alonso, Juan Soto, and Corbin Burns. So this is not me sidetracking over here. I'm just saying that I'm not gonna not sign Juan Soto because Juan Soto doesn't want Pete Alonso and the Mets want Pete Alonso. Like,
again, a little far. I think the chat is. I think everybody needs to know this is hypothetical. I don't think Rob is saying that this is actually true or not. Again, no. the Heyman quote, it was what it was. I think Rob is playing devil's advocate. I don't think that there's any world where Soto goes to the Mets front office and says, I'm not coming here unless Pete Alonso, you don't sign Pete Alonso or something like that. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, that would be hilarious if he did do that, though. Like, what do you do if you're the Mets, right? If all indications are the Mets want to sign Pete Alonso, like, what do you do? What do you if you're Steve Cohen, you're like, I can get both of you. I can give you $1 billion combined and we'll be all okay. But yeah, it's very interesting. And, people are talking about generational player with Soto, and in the comments, he's not worth $700 million. You guys are nuts. I'm sorry. You are, right? He is a generational player. He is. He's a winner, right? And this is where I think Met fans fall into this line. I think they rather the Mets lose so they can complain about the team than actually win. And that's it, right? The Yankees would not made the World Series without Juan Soto. Juan Soto at 19 years old was basically the biggest reason why the Nationals, an average team, won the World Series. Like, why are we discredited in that? Like, why do we just blow that off, right? We were talking about it during the season. How many people in the comment section talked about the Yankees wouldn't even be in the World Series if it wasn't for Juan Soto? Right? Don't you want a winner on this team? A guy that steps up in the playoffs? Like I just don't understand that. Like, it's crazy to me. The guy is clutch. And yeah, 285 is like 315 in Major League Baseball now.
I mean, at this rate, yeah.
It is. It really is. 285 is like 300 nowadays. Right? Nobody bats 300 anymore except for like 1% of baseball. It's rare. And like, let's not act like 300 is realistic for many players anymore. It's not true. 285 is basically 300 now. And yeah, he's not a great defender. We all know that, right? Base running, yes, that's understandable. But you don't sign him because you don't give him. There's not 5 teams going after him, willing to give him $700 million because of his glove. He's doing it because of his bat. That's the reason why, because of the difference he makes in your lineup.
This is the bottom line, Rob, is that he is everything offensively that the Mets need and have been looking for. That's the bottom line. End of discussion. That's it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Any guy that you talk about besides Aaron Judge, right? Aaron Judge, great regular season, can't do anything in the postseason, right? If I put you hand in hand, who do you want? Aaron Judge or Juan Soto? Right? I want a guy, look, win all the MVPs you want during the season. But who stepped up in the playoffs? Right? Why do you think we're having different conversations about the Mets re-signing Pete Alonso? Because of what Pete Alonso did in the playoffs. Right? The whole talk is if Pete Alonso would have struck out against the Brewers in the wild card series, there would be no Met fan to say to bring him back. I can guarantee you that, because they were already turning against him at the end of the season. Right? Because what he did in the playoffs, including myself, by the way, what he did in the playoffs proved to me and showed me, because he had a good postseason in 2022.
He did. Both postseasons were great, honestly.
Correct. And this postseason, it turned a new. It made me say, you know what? I'm willing to give Pete Alonso a little bit more damn money than what people are. Would you give him that 7th year? Yeah, sure. Why not? Because he is what he's seen in the playoffs, I was like, that's great to see because that's what I want. I want a guy that can show up in the playoffs, right? Juan Soto's that guy, right? You're gonna tell me Juan Soto's not worth $700 million, but Aaron Judge is worth $300 million, $325 when he's batting 200 and striked out 20 plus times in the playoffs? I take the guy that can show up in the playoffs every single time. The guy just he's already an excellent player. He gets to that next level in the playoffs. That's the guy you want. I know Juan Soto is going to step up in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
I think to end this in terms of my opinion, if Juan Soto is actually worth 700, it's supply and demand. He's worth more than Judge, that's for sure, right? I think he's worth more than Judge, and I think a lot of people would try to push back on that, but in my opinion, he's worth more than Judge. He's worth somewhere in the middle of Judge and Ohtani. I don't think he's quite worth what Ohtani is making for obvious reasons in terms of the two-way player versus not. But the fact of the matter is that these contracts are supply and demand. They're supply and demand. So it doesn't really matter. Some team is going to pay him that. And if you're going to just pass up on players left and right and just keep making excuses, it's never going to happen. The Mets are never going to sign that player. But the same people that are saying he's not worth it, right, would be the same ones saying, "Oh, Uncle Stevie, he didn't get the guy. He didn't get the guy." And again, I'm not saying all Mets fans that don't want Juan Soto would say that, but there are people in this fan base that play both sides of that fence, and I have seen it, and it's a damn shame, and it's exhausting. Yeah, so objectively, is Juan Soto worth $700 million? Probably not. Supply and demand, it is what it is. I've come to accept that already, and therefore I am ready, if necessary, for Steve Cohen, right? Not for me, but for Steve Cohen to give him that $700 million. And that's just what I'll leave it at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is Kikuchi worth $21 million? Is Severino worth 22 or whatever the hell he got, $22 million a year? Probably not. Is Montas worth $17 million a year? No. Right? It's just you're right. Supply and demand. Cost goes up. Right? Inflation's a bitch. And it works both ways in the professional leagues as well. And that's just how it goes. All right,
1 hour on Juan Soto.
Hey, listen, when you're hopefully 48 hours away from him making a decision, why the hell not, right? All right, so Chris, interest in Brett Baty, and I talked about this during the season and even earlier in the offseason. I said just because Met fans, and another reason why people just kind of sidetracked this whole Brett Baty situation. Met fans don't believe Brett Baty has value, but around the league, teams love these type of players. Guys that teams give up on, that see value in Brett Baty, and he's young and he's cheap. Yeah, of course this team's going to be interested in him, and probably teams that can help the Mets get into getting something. If it can be a bullpen arm, it can be maybe a mid-level starting pitcher, something like that. Interest in Brett Baty, there's been reported that multiple teams have interest in trading for Brett Baty. What do you think the Mets can get for Brett Baty? I know there was a hypothetical where the Mets and Yankees can make a trade, where the Mets can trade Baty for Cortez. That was out there. I know they talked about it on WFAN. I mean, that's not a terrible trade. You get another middle of the road pitcher in the rotation, which annoys me because I don't want 19 number threes and no number ones again. But what is realistic to get for Baty? Because you would think the Mets would want something for a former top prospect and still has value where he can still be a good major leaguer.
Wait, hold on. So in that scenario with the Yankees, they'd move Jazz Chisholm over to second base, I'm assuming?
I think they're doing that anyway.
Oh, okay. I mean, is Glaber under contract or not? I don't know.
No, he's a free agent.
He's a free agent. Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure again. So this is the difficult thing for me to assess, and I think a lot of Mets fans to assess, is that what would make sense on a 1-for-1 deal for Brett Baty versus having to include him in a trade package, right? The teams that I've identified at this point preliminarily are a team like the Mariners and the White Sox that have the capability of giving you that top guy that you want in the rotation that we've talked about in Castillo and Crochet. Obviously, it's not going to be a 1-for-1 deal at all. And probably the Marlins too, who have that same capability of giving you a high-end starting pitcher. That's probably not going to be a 1-for-1 deal as well. So I think the consensus is that Brett Baty has lost enough value to where the Mets are going to have to package him in a deal for anybody that they trade him for, unless you're saying like a Nestor Cortez, which again, I would have to look at the year that Cortez had. I don't watch much Yankees baseball, but like, you know what I mean? So I'd have to actually look at that. But, if you're talking about a trade package, it's all about what these teams perceive Brett Baty as. And again, I'm not saying that Brett Baty doesn't have more left in the tank. I mean, it's not going to happen with the Mets situationally and just the fit wise. This is a player that we've been talking about. Is this guy ready for the bright lights of a big market? And I hate to just say that about a young player like him, 24, 25 years old, but there's a lot of questions whether he could succeed in a bigger market or a smaller market potentially making more sense for him. So that's why I don't really see the Yankees as being a fit there, right? I think that a lot of teams could have that notion as well, given how his Mets tenure has played out. But you take a look at a team like the Mariners, right? The Marlins, the White Sox that are looking for these types of players that are MLB ready, but they're young enough to be there for a certain amount of time to build a core there and to build a nucleus. And maybe even the Brewers who are looking for a young, controllable, win now type of player that Brett Baty could definitely fall under that category with. So, and with the Brewers, it's not so much starting pitching you'd get back. It's the actual bullpen piece in what everybody wants out of the Brewers in terms of Devin Williams coming to your team and being an elite, either closer or setup guy in the case of the New York Mets with a tandem of Williams and Diaz. But listen, per Heyman's report, there's a lot of scouts for these teams basically stating that they understand that Brett Baty has had 2 underwhelming seasons so far for the New York Mets. Everyone understands that Vientos practically came up and took his spot, but everyone sees the tool set that he still has. Again, we haven't seen it on a consistent basis at the major league level. Everybody's seen it at the AAA level, but there's still something there that you have to wonder, right? If he goes into a better situational fit in terms of his next team, he could be a player that the Mets think of and Mets fans think of the one that got away, right? And nobody would actually think that, I hope, because clearly you're going to prioritize Mark Vientos, and that's not the mistake there. But another thing that I saw, and I actually didn't see that Mike Puma said this, but depending on what happens with Pete Alonso is that, if you do move Mark Vientos over to first base, I have my own reservations about that happening, just depending on what Pete Alonso does, of course. But, do you trade Brett Baty if you know that Pete Alonso isn't coming back, just to have that insurance at third base should you need it? Listen, there's a lot of moving parts here, but I think that if there are teams that are going to be interested in terms of what the Mets need in starting pitching in the bullpen, they're going to be looking to trade with smaller market teams. It's not going to be a team like the Yankees or any other major market team out there that happens to need a third baseman. So that's kind of how I assess it, but it's going to be a package deal. We still haven't made up a trade package, a hypothetical trade package for a guy like Luis Castillo. I know that we kind of promised people that we were going to do that. And I guess we still owe the chat and the subscribers that. But you know what? Listen, at the end of the day, I do think the hard truth of the reality is that Brett Baty's days are numbered in a Mets uniform. And the Mets are going to try to get any sort of value that they possibly can for Brett Baty, because again, this doesn't make situational sense, both with his ability to perhaps handle the pressure in New York and being an everyday player in that spotlight, and also just situationally. And if you're trying to sell me on Brett Baty being a corner outfielder, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a 1-for-1. I don't think, what are you going to get? A below average bullpen on for Brett Baty if it's from a good team? No, he's going to a bad team. And I think this interest from other teams with Baty involves bad teams that are probably looking for a package for a top, a rotation arm like a Crochet, a Castillo, or, something of that caliber, right? I think it's hard to believe that the Mets are going to trade Brett Baty for basically nothing. You can't do that on a Brett Baty only trade. It doesn't make sense. So I think it's more about the interest in Baty is involving a trade package. This is why I keep on saying I don't think the Mets are going to spend $275 million on Burns. I don't think they're going to bring in $150 Max Fried $1 million. I don't think so. I think they're going to make a trade for a top line starter. That I still believe that, and I think this interest for Baty from other teams is involving a package for a player of that ilk, in my opinion. I mean, I would. That's the only thing I can think of. Because why trade Brett Baty? I know his value's down, but why trade Brett Baty right now? As a 1-for-1, what are you really going to get? A 5 ERA bullpen arm. Like I think that's probably maybe a Nestor Cortez that had a terrible season last year, and who was also injured. Like, I mean, is that going to excite anybody? No. I find it hard to believe. That's why I think the interest from teams from Baty is probably more in line of what you're just saying, a package type of deal, where teams are still very interested in Baty because we might not see value in Baty anymore because, well, where is he going to play on this Mets team? But people see the stats in AAA and saying, he can do that in Chicago, in the South Side. He could do that in Seattle. He could do that in Pittsburgh or wherever team you want to, find a player that the Mets could use that can help this team. So I think that's where it's coming from. I mean, unless they do trade him for basically nothing, but I don't see Stearns. Stearns sees value in everything. I don't think he's making a trade, especially for a former top prospect, and not getting any value for him. Stearns is not that guy that is just going to throw somebody in the garbage. Even the guys that he didn't get non-tender, he re-signed. Yeah. That he didn't think there was value. So
Ramirez and Hartwig, right?
Yeah. So there's value. If Stearns thinks there's value for Baty, he's going to use it to get value back. I think that's how Stearns has been working here. And I'd be shocked if they trade him for basically nothing.
Yeah, and I think Peter's making a point here that, I guess Peter sees a world where the Mets trade with maybe the Houston Astros if the Astros miss out on signing Alex Bregman and they fail to get a Willy Adames. I mean, that could be a situation as well. I'm not sure if the Astros are going to give up Framber Valdez, but, that could be a situation where you strike a deal with them too. It's still technically, I guess, a smaller market, even though it's a little bit of a bigger stage given how dominant they've been over the past, 8 years or so. So yeah, again, I think the market is very niche for Brett Baty, but again, there's a wide variety of returns or possible returns the Mets could get. But I agree with you, Rob, is that, if you try to package him for a 1-for-1, that's just a waste of value at this point, because Brett Baty has value to some team, right? We know that. It's not the Mets and it's not going to be, any other major market, but he has value to some team. How much value is obviously always the question in any trade talks. But man, you package him with another prospect and get a sneaky either project or a guy that has very high upside. I mean, then you're cooking, whether it's the bullpen or the rotation. And I kind of like that a lot. But, when you're talking about, I think Brett Baty would be more so an asset in a package for, and I have to be careful with the way I kind of, I don't know. I just thought of it. So I think that Brett Baty could be more of an asset to the Mariners in terms of the actual value, but the situational fit would be better for the White Sox with what they actually need. You know what I mean? So, and we had that discussion as well of whether we think it's going to take more or less to get a guy like Luis Castillo, given the contract situation between these two guys and Garrett Crochet versus Luis Castillo, and the fact that the Mets might not have to give up as much for a guy like Castillo coming over with a $108 million contract, where you would have to extend Garrett Crochet that has control of, multiple years of controllability. This is, again, just not a tough situation for David Stearns to navigate in terms of who he should prioritize doing these negotiations with. But if one thing is for certain is that, I do believe this actual report from Heyman, because I see that vision for Brett Baty as well. And it's just there's something that he needs to fix. And it could be just one thing in his mechanics, or it could be one thing in his mindset. It could be a plethora of things, but it could just be one thing, because I feel like he's there. And it's just this potential is just waiting to just showcase itself. But again, the timing factor is just not going to happen in a Mets uniform, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's mental with Brett Baty, because as we see how many times he got sent down in the next game in the minors, he hit 2 home runs, and he looks great. I think it's mental. Whatever it might be, the pressure of New York or whatever. I think it's just mental with him, and that's going to be another talking point, and maybe a little bit more news and rumors during the winter meetings pop up a little bit more about Brett Baty, and maybe a package deal. As I've stated before, a package deal is coming for a starting pitcher. I don't think the Mets are getting Burns for free. Just FYI for everybody, even though that kind of annoys me, but I'm not going to be mad about the trade for a top line starter if that's the case. All right, Montas, official. He is a Met, 2 years, $34 million. It's technically a 1-year deal for 17 with an opt-out after the first year. He spoke today in regards of why he chose the Mets. And, he spoke to Severino, spoke to Manaea, and obviously Montas also spoke about, trying to get back to that level where he was a few years ago with the A's, where he was basically a top-line starting pitcher. He was basically a number 2, if some might even say a number 1. He has that stuff. And you know what? He has similar stuff to Severino. Throws high 90s, 98, 99. He's got a plethora of pitches. And he was good just 3 years ago. In 2001, he had a very good season. I think he was in the mid 3s, if I'm not mistaken, in ERA. Had a really, really good season in just 3 years ago. And you can look back to Sean Manaea 3-4 years ago when he was really good. Severino since 2018. Speaking to one of his best friends in Sean Manaea, and his, a guy that he knows very well in Severino, and why he chose the Mets. Because there was other offers similar to the Mets where he could have went to another team, but he chose the Mets. And Manaea and Severino had something to do with that. I do wonder, Chris, can Montas, and we talked about this already, we both talked about it on our channels in different videos, different lives. I think Montas has a higher ceiling. I think the Mets could fix what they need to fix. And I'm not saying he can be a number 1 or a number 2, but I think he can be a very good number 3. I think he has that capability of doing that, being that type of pitcher, because he has the stuff, right? Can he get his walks down, right? The strikeouts are there, but can he get his walks down? That has been a big issue for him. That was the same thing we talked about with Severino. Same thing we talked about with Manaea. So what are your thoughts on what Montas spoke about in regards to Severino, Manaea, and what his thought process is choosing the Mets over other teams with similar offers?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm kind of just looking at my phone here and just sort of refreshing, so to speak. This is this Juan Soto Watch for a reason. There's no news. Don't get worked up. There's no news, but that's why I'm kind of looking down here at my phone. Things that I took away from the Montas intro presser is that, obviously he spoke with both Sevy and Manaea. They told him that it's a great place to be in terms of the developmental factor, and they have all the tools that you would want to try to get right. I mean, that for lack of a better term, right? In terms of obviously being a little bit of a project, and as was Manaea and Severino before they came to the New York Mets. And, Severino got a great payday, and Manaea is going to get a great payday, whether it's with the Mets or somebody else. And, Montas, that probably is motivation, right? Extra motivation for Montas to sort of replicate that, because these guys at the end of the day, they want a payday too. You know what I mean? Montas got a payday and $17 million per year, but you take a look at Sevy making $22 million a year, Manaea probably north of that. It's like, man, Montas has to be licking his chops watching that. So, he spoke very highly, and he said that those guys spoke very highly of the organization, which is great, right? We need to transition. The Mets need to transition to a place where players want to play in general, right? In general, let alone the big star caliber players. They're still trying to get to a spot where it's a superstar destination, but as long as they start off with it being a destination period, that's a step in the right direction. And we have seen that over the past couple of off seasons with David Stearns at the helm. And we've seen it before too, but again, that was financially motivated, right? With Scherzer and Verlander. And you just said Montas had a couple of similar deals and he prioritized the Mets because, again, they have the tools. They've invested in everything from the minor leagues all the way upward in terms of making the process of developing players, whether it's these projects that David Stearns brings in or the actual prospects themselves at the minor league level. They are prioritizing development. And even Juan Soto, I hate to bring his name back up in the stream, but he was also asking teams about like the developmental side of their farm system. He grilled the Yankees, right? And what Steinbrenner was talking about what are they doing to develop their young talent in the farm system. And I think that that's what the Mets are starting to finally prioritize, and players are taking note of that. So, other stuff that I noted with Montas is that he told, I think Will Salmon was the one who asked him, you know, what adjustments that you made in Milwaukee last season are you looking to carry over to the Mets, that you've already found a little bit of a glimpse of success? Because again, he took off a little bit compared to his time in Cincinnati versus his time in Milwaukee in 2024. And he just said, this is kind of a cliche answer, but I kind of like the answer in terms of the confidence level in his pitches, because I think that's going to be one thing that the Mets need to identify is that Montas has one pitch. He has two pitches that he's had really good success with. One of them is the 95, 96 mile per hour four-seam fastball, but the other one is the splitter. And he needs to be more confident in that pitch because he in turn needs to throw it at a higher clip than what he threw it for in 2024. In comparison to 2022 and 2023 and 2021, right, which was one of his better seasons, he was throwing that splitter for north of 20%, north of 22%, even all the way up to 25%. In 2024, he only threw it for 18%, just north of that, right? 18.3. That needs to go up because that is his best put away pitch after his four-seam fastball, his best off-speed pitch. So I like that he realizes, and he's already found out, that he needs to be more confident in his pitches. And he also mentioned his velo being one of his greatest strengths as well. 96, I'll take that all day long. So I like what I heard there. But for me, I think it makes me feel good as a Mets fan knowing that he probably had a couple of similar offers and he just chose, the New York Mets. And we want players. I think anybody in this chat and you and I can speak on, we want players that want to be here and that want to take on the challenge of putting on a Mets uniform, knowing that you share a city with the New York Yankees, and trying to get this organization in a place where you can potentially, again, not be on the same level playing field, because I think the Mets already are in terms of their current status, right? But try to win this city back over. So it's going to take a long time, Rob. This is not just going to be a last offseason kind of thing and this offseason kind of thing. This is going to be a slow progress to making sure the Mets are on the trajectory of a Dodgers 2.0. But listen, man, I'm happy with Montas. I was scratching my head just a little bit when the signing actually happened. If anyone follows me over on X, same handle as my YouTube, if you follow me over there, I was like, what are we really cooking up here, right? But the more I look at it, the more I realize that it's a fifth or sixth option in this rotation, presumably depending on what happens from here on out, the better I feel. And I do think that Montas does have that higher upside than a guy like Luis Severino came in here with this past offseason, or the last offseason, I should say.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't think it's a bad signing. Again, it is a one-year deal basically with the opt-out. If he has a bad season, he's clearly going to opt in. But, that opt-out is there to incentivize the pitcher to be better than what he was. And if you can, make him use that put-away pitch and that splitter and then use that high-velocity fastball, that's his two best pitches, and, working, his other pitcher too that can help him out as well. We're not asking him to have a 2.5 ERA here. If he has, 3.94 ERA, that is a huge jump. Only a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, 2022, before he got traded to the Yankees, he had a 3.18 ERA. And everybody's like, oh, but he sucked with the Yankees. Yeah, but he was hurt. right? We forget about that. And the Yankees are the destroyer of pitchers, as we well know. So, I'm not taking any clout on that. Now, he had a bad season not a really good season last year with the Reds. Went to the Brewers, looked a lot better. And, you just hope you get that caliber of Montas, maybe a little bit better. And now we're talking, especially when you have Montas, Peterson, and hopefully a healthy Kodai Senga. That's a start of a solid rotation. Yes, they need more. And we're going to talk about the plan going forward, right? Montas was clearly a plan for David Stearns. David Peterson's going to be in this rotation. Maybe the Mets are heavily looking at Kodai Senga as the guy that can be that ace. We talked about this a little bit when it comes to the hot stove, the last hot stove, episode 10, with starting pitching, where the Mets are going to go. Are they going to go to that signing of that big free agent round? Are they going to make a big trade for a top line starter? Or are they going to go on these prove-it type deals, these one-year deals, with opt-outs and stuff like that for, bring in Buehler. Obviously, Shane Bieber just signed back with the Guardians, so he's out of the question for, a prove-it type of deal. Are the Mets going to bring back Manaea and sign Buehler, and then there's your rotation? And, that could be a solid rotation, but what happens in the playoffs if the Mets make the playoffs? Who are you really counting on there? And, some might believe that Manaea is an ace now, right? He pitched like one last year for the Mets, but can you really count on that going forward with his new mechanics? And now that everybody has a book on him, they have video of him. They've seen him a second time now. Is it going to be the same with Sean Manaea? And that's where we got to talk about David Stearns' plan. In your opinion, Chris, what is David Stearns' starting pitching plan for this rotation in 2025? Do you think a top-line starter is coming, either free agency or trade? And if not, what do you think they're going to do?
I want to say a top line starter is coming to the New York Mets via trade. I don't think that they, unfortunately, are going to be offering up the money, or not even the money, because I don't think money is the factor. It's the years for a guy like Max Fried, who, again, I will go on record for the 100th time and say that I would actually make that deal. But again, this is David Stearns' ship to lead. Or Corbin Burns, right? But again, who knows? The Mets have been playing this game, this offseason game so far, very, with their cards very close to them. So even though we're hearing a lot of smoke surrounding the Orioles bringing back Corbin Burns and the Red Sox being interested and the Yankees in on Max Fried, who knows? Maybe the Mets jump out of nowhere and just, they're like, gotcha. You know what I mean? Like, here we are. Here's the money. Here's our ace. So I hope that's the case, but I don't see it through the free agency route. But what I will say, though, is that I think someone tweeted this out and you kind of responded to it over on X. And the question is, rotation being the same right now with the assets that they have right now. And if you add a guy like Walker Buehler and Sean Manaea to it and those guys only, would you be okay with that? And I know you said the answer was no, but honestly, I think my answer would be yes, to be honest with you.
Well, for the season, though, right? That's the issue, right? That leaves you in a scenario where, say, if nobody really steps up as the quote unquote ace, but you got I think it would be a solid rotation, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be a solid rotation, right? In the regular season, right? Here's the issue. Right now, you gotta hope that somebody really steps up as an ace, or you're looking for that ace at the trade deadline now, and now you got to give up more assets, not just money, but assets, when you could have easily done money or assets in the offseason and not worry about the trade deadline for a top line starter. You could worry about a bullpen or another bat, depending on what you need. You don't got to worry about that. That's where I have a little bit of issue with that rotation. Not that I don't think it's solid, but if nobody steps up as that ace, you're clearly behind the 8 ball going into the playoffs because there's no clear-cut ace. And that clearly was one of the Mets' problems this year.
And No, and I hear you as well on that too. And I'm not trying to argue against the notion that, we don't need an ace, because we clearly do. And I would definitely 100% in a heartbeat give the contract to Fried or Corbin Burns, right, to be that guy for us. I would 100% do it. But are we confident in David Stearns doing it? That's just a different ballgame. And that's something us Mets fans really have to talk about and just, I guess, accept at this point. You know what I mean? With what the trends have been. So again, with that rotation, if everything remains consistent and you add Walker Buehler and Sean Manaea, yes, I think the Mets can get back to where they were at this past season. Would that put them over the hump over a team like the Dodgers? The objective answer is no, right? And I'm not trying to sit here and tell you all that a rotation full of big name guys, is the way to go. No one's saying that. The Dodgers clearly have taken that route because they went out to go get Yamamoto. They have a guy like Glass now, right? They made the investment for Shohei in hopes of him coming back and being a dominant pitcher. They just signed Blake Snell, of all guys, to go into that rotation. They went the big money, the big name route. You don't need that clearly to win in this day and age. You need, like you just said, and I'll back you up on that, you need one guy that will be a game one starter for you, and you need a competent rotation, presumably a healthy Kodai Senga, a guy that maybe you could space out a little bit more in terms of Sean Manaea so he doesn't get as worked up and ramped up in terms of 180 plus innings pitched and kind of phase out during the playoffs. There's different ways that you can set up this rotation without needing, right, 2 or 3 big names. Again, what's the goal here, right? The goal is to get past the Dodgers, and that's the goal, to win a championship. You won't do that by only adding Sean Manaea or Walker Buehler. You'll have the best chance at doing that by adding either Crochet Castillo or Fried Burns. I think everybody knows that, but at the end of the day, it's like, if you're asking me my confidence level, again, I don't know. I can only hope at this point because we haven't seen David Stearns. Like, forgive me if I'm wrong. What's the last pitcher that David Stearns gave a multi-year contract out to? That's anything past 2-3 years. Is there any 4, 5, 6-year deals like he's ever given out to a pitcher?
See, it's hard to judge that because he didn't get no money from the owner with the Brewers,
and I get that too.
He had Burns and Woodruff come up through the system, so he had aces. Why pay for an ace when you have them there? You know what I'm saying? So it's hard to judge that, right? He has the money now, right? But is his philosophy saying, I don't like giving 8-year deals to a top, starter when it can break down? Now, I tend to say, okay, I understand that philosophy, but at the end of the day, there was the Dodgers. Yes, their offense went crazy, but they had somebody step up in the World Series pitching wise, multiple guys who pitched great, really damn good in the postseason. Yamamoto stepped up. Jack Flaherty stepped up in the game. Buehler stepped up, right? They had somebody step up. And oh, by the way, at one point, they were aces for their team. Right?
No, they traded for Flaherty, though. So, right. I mean.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, Flaherty, besides Skubal, but Flaherty was the Tigers' ace not too long ago. And on top of that, Yamamoto was the best pitcher in Japan. The Dodgers were getting him as like an ace, paying him like an ace. And then Walker Buehler, 3-4 years ago, prior to the injury, was an ace. He was
but Yamamoto didn't he didn't perform like an ace throughout the entire season.
No, but they paid him like one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but that's what I'm saying. Like, we know, look, the Mets beat up. They beat the Phillies, who had a better rotation technically, right? Going for, or at least a top line starter, right? The Mets found a way to beat the Phillies in that game 1 against Wheeler, but they couldn't hit Wheeler, but they got to the bullpen, right? That could be a strategy to win. But what were we talking about in the playoffs? We were talking about Kodai Senga, who pitched like 6 innings all year, starting game 1. Why was that? Why was that? When Manaea was available. Why was that? Because they still didn't believe that Manaea is an ace. We didn't have that ace. Well, maybe they did, and maybe they thought they can get away with winning the game with Kodai Senga, which was stupid in itself.
I think that's more of what it was.
Correct. Right? That's what I think they were trying to steal a game and still have Manaea for game 2. The fact is, we were going into games saying, is he going to break down? Is he going to be? Is he going to have that ace-like stuff? Right. I don't want to question that. I want to know going to the playoffs, game one. Right. Granted, the Mets had a crazy end of the season where their rotation kind of got mixed and matched because they had to win games late in the year and they had to play a wild card series. But if you win a division and you're not playing in a wild, say if you get the bye, your game one starter, you should know. There should be a freaking question who's pitching game one. I want no question who's pitching game one when you have the opportunity to set up your rotation. If you have a question of setting up your rotation, when you have an opportunity to set up your rotation, and there's still questions from the fan base and the teams not really saying who's going to pitch game one, you don't have an ace. It's just a fact. And everybody can contradict if you want to, but it's a fact. And that was the Mets' issue. The Mets had issues because they ended up having Quintana being their best starter in the postseason. We lost because we didn't have a top-line starter, right? Somebody stepped up for the Dodgers. It's just that simple. That's why the Mets lost, right? The Mets did score a bunch of runs in certain games, but they did get shut down by good starting pitching, right?
Yeah.
Yamamoto shut us down at Citi Field. And that's where I tend to believe that, not saying that you can't win, but why make it harder when you don't have to? Why go into a season where you have Senga, Buehler, Manaea, Peterson, Montas, which is fine. But you leave in a situation where if nobody really steps up through April to the end of July, and now you're going to the trade deadline, guess what the Mets need? A top-line starter. Oh, great. We could have easily had them in the offseason and start the season with an ace. Maybe you could have won more games earlier in the year. Now we have to struggle to win more games later in the year. It seems backwards, a backward strategy to me, where you have the opportunity, money or trade, to get a top-line starter. It's not like there's nobody available. There's 4 guys available.
Yeah.
At least what we know. 4 guys available to get. You can get one of those guys and solve basically your top-line starter. And you can mess around with the rotation after that, right? If you don't want to sign Manaea and get Buehler, or you want to get Manaea and another, project, fine. But I know every 5th day there's an ace on the mound that can be a stopper. That's just a fact.
Yeah. And that's why I opened up my last statement by saying I do think that they're going to get that ace, right? I mean, I would have to believe that David Stearns realizes that he has the assets now to go ahead and do that, and that is what the Mets' most glaring need is, outside of the need for Juan Soto in this lineup to compete with the Dodgers. And again, we heard the transition of being competitive for 2025 and beyond, right? We were talking about that all last offseason. I mean, the time is now. There's no waiting till 2026, right? There's no larger plan here at scale. You get the free agents available now, because if you sign Juan Soto, I mean, you're going to have, right, all that time on that contract to compete for a world championship. But, there's guys that can help you right now on the market. Correct. You just reached a league championship series. There's no greater plan here to be had in 2026. The prospects coming up can be phased in very easily, for me, at least the top ones, right? Yeah. It's a very simple plan, and this team is starting to take the mold of one that can finally mesh together very well. And we weren't having these same conversations last offseason because it was a different ball game. The Correct. Time is now, Mets fans. The time is now. So I agree that 100% there needs to be an ace on this team. I have my doubts and reservations that David Stearns is going to go the free agency route of getting that ace. I also have reservations that the name of the ace is going to be Garrett Crochet and Luis Castillo. There's going to be, listen, the Mets do this all the time. There's going to be some name out there that we're not talking about at all. Maybe perhaps nobody was talking about, just like Frankie Montas, nobody was talking about in this fan base who comes up on here and speaks about the Mets, right? There was nobody talking about Frankie Montas, at least that I know of. And they got him. there's going to be some available ace out there, whether it's from the Marlins or some other team.
Yep.
Right? Maybe, perhaps, again, I don't know if the Mariners are making Castillo available. That's speculation. So we only know, I'm going to revise your statement. We only know of 3 solidified arms that are available in the trade market because we haven't really heard official word that the Mariners are going to deal Castillo. I think it's just implied. So Crochet is definitely gone. And then you have Fried and Burns out there on the market, 100% that are available. So there's going to be some other name, Rob, I'm telling you. And I'm trying to do my research outside and being like, who is it going to be? This is the game that we play when we drop our videos. This is what we do.
Yeah, Chris, and you know what? And I was at work bored, which is shocking, but I was making a list. I was going across all the teams. I'm like, oh, could he be available? I have a list on my phone. I swear to God, I have a list on my phone because what the hell else are we doing, right? You know, we got to make content. We got to figure out some stuff so we can talk about a plan, right? Other than what might be available. Yeah. So I wanted to bring this up where we've been talking about going for it 2025. We didn't bring this up. This was the organizational plan. 2025 was supposed to be the go get it year, right? And if they don't do the go get it plan, then what are they really doing, right? Lonnie brought up 2001, and I'm so glad he brought that up because I watch on MLB Network. They show like the 2000 playoffs and how the Mets went to the World Series, the Yankees went to the World Series, and the Subway Series in 2000. Mike Hampton was a star for the New York Mets, right? And this annoys me about the Mets because this has been a trend. Will Pano Cohen, this has been a trend, right? 2000, 2015, 2022, all right? And you could even bring up 2024 if you want to. Mike Hampton didn't want to come back to the Mets, right? He went to Colorado for, the schools and all that other nonsense. But the Mets basically brought back the same team. They got Kevin Appier. That's what they did in 2001. So to lose out on Hampton and then get Kevin Appier, who wasn't better than Hampton, and bring back basically the same team in 2001, it ended up being not enough. And the Mets did not make the playoffs again until 2006. This is what I get upset about when people say, what do you think the Mets could have done to be better? Well, they could have done something in the offseason and the trade deadline, those years that I've talked about. 2001, right? After the Yankees won the World Series in 2000, guess who they got? Mike Mussina, right? So they got better. And look, they didn't win after that, but they got better, right? The Mets got to the World Series, but didn't do more to finally win a World Series. They didn't do enough. Again, right? 2006, right? They did get, they called Beltran, Delgado, all those guys. They brought enough. The team just lost to a worse team in 2006 in the Cardinals, right? But then they choked in 07, 08. Why? Because they didn't do enough. They brought in Tom Glavine for crying out loud, right? They didn't do enough. 2015, I talked about this, right? They made great trade with Yoenis Cespedes. They made a couple of bullpen arms, right? They weren't supposed to be there. This is similar to 2024. They weren't supposed to be that team. At the trade deadline, they were basically a 500 team in 2015. So it was a surprise getting to the World Series. But when we got there, we're like, oh, wow. What happened in 2016? They brought back Yoenis Cespedes and lived off of that young rotation. They didn't get the lineup that wasn't very good for everybody who did think they weren't very good. They had a broken down David Wright. Ruben Tejada was your shortstop.
That was a dreadful lineup. I mean, let's be honest. It was a terrible lineup.
Lagares, terrible lineup. What did they do in 2016? They brought back Yoenis Cespedes, did nothing else. And guess what? They barely got to the wild with all the injuries they had. They got to a wild card. They lost to the Giants. Then they did nothing else after that. Harvey fell apart. Syndergaard fell apart. Matz fell apart. The whole rotation, right? Generation K 2.0, gone. They didn't do enough. Then we get to 2022 when they had an opportunity. What did the Mets need in 2022? A bat. They got Vogelbach, Ruff, and Naquin. They could have done better. They didn't. Don't tell me, you could have got these guys didn't have good second halves after they got traded elsewhere. But that doesn't mean they could have been better with the Mets with their lineup, as good as they were. And then in 2024, right, where Stearns did not want to trade prospects because he was still quote unquote evaluated, and 2024 was supposed to be an evaluation year, regardless of what the Mets did. So David Stearns, did a couple of moves, right? What he could without trading top prospects. But this was a valuation year and hope for the best. That's basically what he did in 2024. And the Mets got to game 6 of the NLCS. Imagine if they would have got a top line starter at the deadline. Maybe it would have made the difference. Maybe we would have got to the World Series. So you see the trend here? The Mets never do enough after a very good season. They have subpar off seasons and deadlines after that, and then we wonder why we don't get to the top. This has been a trend over 20 years, 24 years. And I'm glad Lonnie brought that up because I was going to bring that up next. After you have a good season, you talked about it, Chris, you want to get to that next level. Game 6 of the NLCS, I want to get to at least a game 7 of the NLCS or better. You can't do less in this offseason and then tell me you're going to be better off and hope for the trade deadline that the Mets never do enough and wonder why we don't get over the top. And then complain every single year that, well, they had a great season. It was fun. We can't use Grimace and OMG as the topping point and Jose Iglesias, the journeyman, as a talking point. It wasn't enough. That wasn't enough. Who let the dogs out in 2000 wasn't enough. The freaking Baja Men wasn't enough. Like, it's all these freaking gimmicks when you can do it in the offseason and do it at the deadline and fucking go for it. It pisses me off because we settle and act like it's enough. And then wonder why we complain every year when the Mets don't go and win the World Series. And act like it's not the front office fault. It's not the owner's fault. And it's not having subpar off seasons and not doing enough at the trade deadline and telling me it's okay. Because it's not. And this is where the Mets are falling into again. Juan Soto or not, you could still have a really damn good offseason. And if you're going to tell me you walk into this season without an ace, a true ace, and tell me we're contending and going for it, you're lying to our faces. And that's where it pisses me off. Because now we got to rely on the trade deadline that we never do anything big. When we finally do Yellow and Cespedes, Met fans almost fainted because it never happens. And that still wasn't enough. And the following year, they do nothing just to bring back Yoenis Cespedes. At some point, you got to go for it. Lindor, and if you do bring up Alonso and Nimmo, that core is getting older, folks. You got to win with these guys in over the next 2 to 4 years. Because if you don't, now you have to rely on Juan Soto still being good, really damn good, and bringing in more guys to help Juan Soto that are younger and better than 34-year-old Lindor, 34-year-old Nimmo, 35-year-old Pete Alonso. Remember that, guys. That's all I have to say. I'm sorry I went on that crazy rant. Because
No, I agree. I mean, it is the time to go for it. You got to get an ace. Man, I don't know if I have much more else to say other than what you just said. I think it was a perfectly well executed rant, to be honest with you. I don't want to get into this trap of thinking that like it's too late or, just because the offseason has been quiet on the pitching front for the Mets outside of Montas, it's time to panic. It's not, right? There's a waiting period, a layover period where you just have to wait it out and the dominoes will start to fall, right? So again, I think the Mets do, probably this is a subjective thought, but I think that they do end up with that ace. But I agree with you, man. It's the time to go for this is right now. And with the Mets being who they are, with who is leading the charge in terms of who the owner is, I respect very heavily that David Stearns has the just pure knack of putting these projects together and somehow making it work. But that's, if that's all that's going to happen, and if you're just going to rely on that solely, you need to reevaluate that plan if you're David Stearns.
Too much hope, in my opinion.
Too much hope.
Right? The Dodgers the Dodgers aren't leaving any doubt. And I'm not saying that's the only way to win, but they just won a World Series and they're doing more. They might sign Sasaki. They just signed Snell. They're going to re-sign Teoscar Hernandez. So they're making their team better after winning the World Series. That's what you do, right? I'm sick and tired of hoping things go right. How about going into a season knowing that we're fucking good and that we're better than the Braves, better than the Phillies? We could be better than the Phillies. We could be better than the Braves or the Dodgers. I don't want that. I want to know going into the season, you know what? We're one of the top 3 teams in baseball. And we were that in 2022. And we needed what we needed and didn't get what we needed. And I feel like it's a trend again this offseason where, they're in on Juan Soto, but if they don't get Juan Soto, their offseason is going to be completely different and might be subpar, right? They didn't get Yamamoto last year, and it seemed like, I know this was an evaluation year, but what if they got Yamamoto, and they said, you know what? Wow, we got our ace here. We got Yamamoto. Let's go. Let's do more. And it felt like that was the offseason. When Yamamoto went to the Dodgers, it felt like the Mets did, all right, let's get Manaea, Severino, lower level guys, and, let's see what happens. I hope they don't do that with Juan Soto where they say, well, we didn't get Juan Soto. Oh, great. Let's bring back Pete Alonso to make the fans happy. And, let's bring in, Buehler and Manaea and let's go about our business. Because I can see them doing that just to shut up Met fans who are excited Pete Alonso's back. I could really see them doing that. And that is another subpar offseason and not doing enough. And now you're going to need more at the deadline. And you're probably not going to do more at the deadline because it's a trend. 24 years is a trend. It's a long time. Some people might not have been born that are in this chat right now. I was a young boy. I'm just saying, I just hope they don't fuck this up.
But at the end of the day, though, Rob, we have to be fair to this current regime, and that what happened before, because you experienced that under a different ownership group, does not mean that you have to project that onto them, right? You know what I mean? And if you take a look at the winners and the World Series winners, especially especially with the Braves, I think about maybe even like the Nationals or those kinds of teams, is that they had an advantage because they had a competent rotation already at their disposal. You know what I mean? And the previous, and again, I don't know, Steve Cohen or again, whoever's leading the charge other than Steve Cohen in the past couple of years and getting together this Scherzer, Verlander stuff. Again, we were very happy about it at that time, but it ended up being a massive failure, right? It ended up backfiring, and it honestly ended up putting the Mets in a situation where they need multiple years to recover from that. So, and we're still experiencing that. So they are going into this offseason at a disadvantage given how many rotation spots they need to fill. And
that's their own fault, though.
What was that?
That's their own fault, though.
It's not Stearns' fault, though.
Oh, no. I'm just saying, but Steve Cohen was the owner, so it's partly his fault. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's the thing, though. They set themselves up in situations where you have basically no rotation, right? Your big prize first baseman is a free agent, and now you're struggling to fill all these spots, and this was supposed to be a 2025 go for a year. So, they put that on themselves. And look, it's not Stearns' fault, even though I can blame Stearns for 2024 at the deadline because he was evaluating the prospects, didn't want to trade him, didn't do enough. And guess what? The Mets didn't do enough and win. They got to as far as they can get to, but it wasn't enough. Now I expect to be going further. And I just hope they have that same mindset. Because if they're going into this hope mindset again, what are we really doing here? Why are we having a conversation about the 25 Mets when we're going to talk about, well, do we have an ace? Is this offense good enough? It's just crazy to me. When everything's available in the offseason, go get it. Maybe because then you don't have to probably worry about it at the deadline. And you can get little things that is needed. And you talked about, right? The Braves, the Nationals, right? They made trades at the deadlines where what they really needed, they got. Right? Even though the Rangers won the World Series a couple of years ago, right? They needed pitching. They went and got it. Now, it didn't help them at the end, really. I mean, Jordan Montgomery did, right? But what they needed, they got. They didn't say, oh, I'm not going to hold on to this prospect, right? They traded for Max Scherzer. It didn't work for them, technically, but they traded Acuna for him. They weren't caring about the future. They weren't about getting to the World Series. And they were on the they were on the verge of choking the AL West away, and then they did, but still went out and got it. I feel like the Mets don't do that, and that's the issue. They did it once with Cespedes for Fulmer. Other than that, and even that ended up not being enough. And I feel like if we're going to continue to hope for things to happen and this pitcher to be good, this hitter to be stepping up, we're relying, if we don't get Juan Soto and the Mets bring back Pete Alonso and not do more with the lineup, they're hoping Vientos has another great year and steps up even bigger, right? They're hoping for a bounce back from Alvarez. They're hoping Pete Alonso's better with runners in scoring position. You need Lindor to have an MVP type season again, and Nimmo to stay healthy and have a better year. Like, it's a lot of hope. I don't want to hope anymore. I want to go into the season feeling confident in a roster, and I don't feel like I have that in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we'll really see the makeup and the plan of this team at the end of this offseason when it's all said and done, and we'll revisit this discussion on this early day of December 6th, probably sometime in January, when most of the free agents, not all of them, but most of them are off the board. And we'll really see. But in terms of the sentiment, I agree with you 100%.
We have what, $140 million basically off the books, and we have a lot of money to play with. It's stupid not to spend it. So, all right, Chris. So rapid fire time to end this stream. We're heading up on 2 hours. A few days before the winter meetings, we're gonna have Juan Soto watch parties. I think I'm gonna set up a watch party for like around 1:30, 2 o'clock tomorrow, and just stay alive for a majority of it. Just why the hell not? And hopefully he signs tomorrow and not tonight. Don't do it tonight, Juan Soto, please. Don't do it tonight. I gotta go to work. Like, I don't need to be in the middle of a receiving dock where you can barely hear me going crazy if the Mets sign Juan Soto, because I'd probably get fired. But it is what it is. But I'm going to keep it on Juan Soto, the rapid fire for you, because why the hell not? We spoke about it for like an hour and a half. Do you think it's going to be the Mets? And do you think it's going to be an astronomical number, total contract-wise, overall?
Yes. And yes. I've had reservations about this contract exceeding $700 million. With the latest reports, if they are true about the number already being at 700 million, then that kind of just it doesn't discourage me, because again, if that's the price, that's the price. And I'm not going to go back on everything that I already said this stream, right? I mean, the supply and demand is what we talked about, right? So, but I had my doubts, and I still do, that the number fully gets up to the first number starting with a 7. Again, it's all dependent on years. So if a team gives him 15 years, which again is still a little bit much, right? I mean, that's paying him until he's 41 years old. I'd much prefer a 13, 14-year deal. Of
course.
I don't think he's taking anything less than 13. That's going to up the price of the total contract value, right? And that's something where, again, I believe Ohtani's was 10, right? If I'm not mistaken. I think it was 10.
I think it was 10 or 11.
Something like that. Anyways, It doesn't really matter. Yes, I think it's going to be the Mets. I just have this feeling. And you know what? Even if he doesn't sign with the Mets, I mean, again, it's a guess game anyways at this point, right? And as I think this is very important to say on record, the fact that if the Mets don't get Juan Soto, it's going to be okay, right? It's going to be okay as long as the Mets do their due diligence in the rest of the market, as we've talked about this stream, of building a competent lineup, which they would need to do, because again, there's a very high turnover rate that we're experiencing from 2024 to 2025. There's a lot of wealth at that point that's opened up for you to spread out around your lineup and the pitching staff. So it's not the end all be all. Would much rather have Juan Soto on my team than not, because again, I don't think that would stop them from making moves elsewhere in terms of the gravity of things. But I do think it's going to be the Mets. I still want to say it's going to be under $700 million, but with everything that I've been hearing recently, I would say it's probably going to be around 700. And if it's at 700, it's going to be 701 because there's no way they're signing that contract without it being higher than Ohtani's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's my answer. My rapid fire for you has to do with Sevy. Knowing that 3-year, $67 million deal, yes, it's a little bit of an overpay, but with the market shaping up to what it is, you know, Kikuchi getting what he got, Montas getting what he got, especially coming off of a 4.84 ERA. I know it's not the end all be all, it's the projectability of Montas instead of the actual production in 2024. Would you have given Severino that deal, yes or no?
I don't think the Mets believe that Severino can repeat what he did last year or be better for that money. And I think that's why Sean Manaea is. I know that has nothing to do with it, but why Sean Manaea is probably going to come back, because I think the Mets think that he can repeat or be close to what he did last year. Even if it's not the same, I think they think that he can be that. I think Luis Severino is mentally soft, to be quite honest with you, and we saw it in the playoffs. I think Manaea is mentally tough. I just think he got tired. So I think with the Frankie Montas was a better signing over Severino, because I think the upside, saving $5 to $6 million on Montas, is a better option, because I think the Mets think they can get more out of Montas now than they can do with Severino, $22 million a year, in my opinion.
And my follow-up to that, because I know that was a little bit of a week of a question, my follow-up to that is, now that Sevy's off the board and the Mets don't have the capability of re-signing him. And by the way, they were interested, right? They were interested up until a certain point when they heard what he wanted, then they were out. Do you think, given that you've already stated in this stream that you don't think the Mets are going to sign a Fried or a Burns, right? Do you think it's a must that the Mets re-sign Manaea at this point?
If they don't get a top line, if they don't go for a top line starter, I think you would have to. I think you would have to hope that Manaea is as good as he was last year. I think you would have to think that. I think they would have to sign Sean Manaea at that point. I mean, if you don't, then what the hell are we doing here? Like,
I mean, keeping in mind the situation is a hypothetical in terms of they would still be in the market of trading for an ace. Like, would you think that Manaea is a must at that point still?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think that if the Mets are in line for a top line starter, I think they'll get Manaea, but I think it's going to be between Manaea and Buehler, if that makes sense. So,
whereas right now, if they're not in on a trade, it'd be both of them.
I think they have to be both. If it's not, what the hell are we doing? Like, then I don't know what. All bets are off. Then I'm not. Nobody would like my grade to end the offseason if that's the case. Like, honestly.
Goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a shit show, to be quite honest with you. Like, you're going into hoping way too much, and it's not going to be fun at all.
Yeah. And another good name that I saw in the chat was Nick Pivetta. He's had a couple of good seasons back to back. He's still only 31 years old. So I could see that happening as well. Again, his market's probably going to be right around what Luis Severino got, though, at 3 years, $67 million. So it would basically be a 2.0 of that situation. But I do like what I've seen from Nick Pivetta. I'm still a little bit wary that the Mets go down that route. But again, if it came down to it, if that's the route they took, I can buy into that at that point. But
yeah, I mean, if it's not a top line starter and they get, Manaea and Pivetta or Evaldi or something like that nature, okay, fine. If you didn't want to go with Buehler, that's fine. But again, I don't know if it's going to be enough. But they're really hoping Manaea or Kodai Senga is going to step up. And
yeah,
that's. I mean, how can you be confident into that? And we'll see. I mean, look, it could happen. And look, if it does happen, great. Right? We save a hell of a lot of money and we still get an ace. Great. But it's a lot of hope. And then if that doesn't happen, guess what happens at the trade deadline? That's the whole picture that I'm setting up for, in my opinion. Chris.
Sorry, this is my third rapid fire question.
Buto
and yeah, we are approaching 2 hours. Buto in the bullpen or the rotation?
I want to keep him in the bullpen. I see what he can do in the bullpen. this you put him in the bullpen in the rotation. Now you got to get another bullpen on that can be as good or better. I think Budo, Nunez, Diaz sounds really damn good. I like that. 7, 8, 9. That sounds nice.
Budo, you know what though? You know what also sounds nice though? You know what also sounds nice? Budo as your 6th option in the rotation.
Wonderful. We can sign 3 of those.
But what I will tell you though is that if you look at Budo's
or number 2, I don't think it's worth it.
I mean, okay, so the conversation that we were having last season is who on this team is going to give us length out of the rotation. The first guy, if my memory serves me correctly, that started to give the Mets at least a little bit of length when he got up into the major leagues was Jose Butto. He was going 6, maybe even 7 innings pitch, and he was the first one to do it even before a guy like Shamanaya was starting to do it. And then Butto started off pretty well in the bullpen as well. Like he had some good flashes there, and he has good stuff in general, right? He has great stuff. He can do both, and he's flexible in that manner, which is why I'm a big Jose Butto fan. But he started to fade off a little bit in the bullpen as the season progressed on, and he started to become a little bit less reliable, a little bit of walk issues. So I don't know.
Well, he also didn't pitch that many innings in his career either, so I could see why he did that. But again, if you're worried about innings, why throw him into the rotation? Great, he's going to be a 4 or 5 inning pitcher again, and he's going to be another 5 or 6. Unless they think Jose Butto can be a number 2, then it's not worth it, in my opinion. Because you can get a lot of guys that can throw 4 or 5 innings as a starter, throwing to a 3.5, 4 ERA. You can do that easily for free agency or in a trade if you wanted to. I think why take him out of a bullpen where you got to get more bullpen arms? Right, Nunez is coming back. Great, that's great. You got Diaz. You need a lot of bullpen help. I don't see it.
Reed Garrett, yeah.
You know, look, would I be okay with that? Look, if they get a frontline starter, maybe I can see them doing that. But I don't think it's beneficial because unless he's going to be a number 2 and is projected to be a number 1 or a number 2, I don't think it's worth it. You can get 5 inning pitchers anywhere. I don't know.
Well, then in that case, that case, Paul Blackburn opens up as your opening day 6th starter. So if you don't want to give any competition to him, then that's what you're going to roll with.
Fine. I think Blackburn's fine as a back end rotation guy, to be quite honest. Like I think Blackburn can do exactly what Butto can do, 5 innings.
Yeah, I mean, both of them can go 5 innings. I think Butto has a higher ceiling.
Production-wise, there's a little bit of a sample size with Jose Butto. Now it was good. But again, if you're going to use him as a 5 inning pitcher and still worried about his innings, then you're putting them out there knowing he's not probably going to go past the 5th inning most times, especially early on in the season. What are you benefiting? You benefiting what? Maybe he can be a great starter? Sure. But I think there's a reason why they put him in the bullpen, not just because of necessity. I think that they're concerned about him breaking down, pitching 180 innings. 160, 170 innings. I think that's more of a reason why they're going to keep him in the bullpen because I think they don't trust him staying strong throughout a season as a starter, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here too. I do think that Butto, but that's the advantage of it too, is that if you compress those innings early on for Jose Butto, if anything should happen to a guy like Paul Blackburn or anybody else for that matter, you could, as a plan C type option of last resort, just put Jose Butto back into the rotation if you absolutely have to midway through the season or whatever. So no, I agree with you. Opening day, I think Butto's in the bullpen, but I just wanted to ask you, push back a little bit just because what are we here to do if we're not pushing back a little bit? So no, that's all I got for you guys.
All right. So again, episode 11, Mets Hot Stove in the books, guys. The next Hot Stove will probably be sometimes during the winter meetings. There's going to be Juan Soto Watch Party shows at least tomorrow, unless he signs tonight. There's going to be winter meeting shows. It's probably going to relate to a Mets Hot Stove altogether. But the next time me and Chris are probably together on a hot stove, Juan Soto probably will be with an organization. Hopefully the Mets. We can have more stuff to talk about with that. So, Chris, let everybody know what's going on with your channel and your final thoughts.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, just bunch of stuff coming out on the channel. I got a video hopefully dropping tomorrow. It's not solidified, set in stone, but keep an eye on the channel. But I provided you guys a lot of stuff already on the channel for you guys to go check out if you haven't checked out everything already. I definitely appreciate everybody being here. Keep an eye out on the shorts, the Mets News in the Minute segments that I have on my channel. I'm going to be trying to do a lot more True Mets Talk live streams as well with some more guests. Obviously, I'm going to be doing these Mets Hot Stove lives with Rob. And let's just hope for good news. That's really all I got, to be honest with you. It's a long off season. It's a marathon, not a race. I will say that. I'm not panicking whatsoever. Even if the Mets don't get Juan Soto, I'm going to be severely disappointed, but I'm not going to panic. Where I'll start panicking is like after the winter meetings, maybe a day or two after that, 3 days after that. If we don't have anything like solidified by then, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of getting into a little bit of a panic mode. But for right now, I trust the process. I think that this organization, this front office, and everybody else in between knows exactly what this team needs, especially watching. It's hard not to watch if you're a team that just got beat by the world champions. It's hard not to watch what they're continuously doing to make themselves better, even off of a championship winning season, right? In terms of their re-signings, the Tommy Edman deal that came out of nowhere as well, in terms of them bringing him back to a multi-year deal, Blake Snell signing, etc., on the verge of bringing back Teoscar Hernandez. They are gearing up to run it back because running it back for them worked out. And then some with Blake Snell. The Mets got a lot of work to do. Let's not, let's call a spade here. But I think the Mets will be up to the challenge, and they certainly have enough money to do it. Don't worry, Mets fans. It's going to be all right. And hopefully Juan Soto is wearing orange and blue in Queens. Oh, man, I cannot wait for that decision. I almost wish he did. Like, I think someone said it in the chat earlier saying that I wish he just did like a little bit of an announcement like LeBron did back when he was joining the Heat. You might as well just do it because we at least know when the decision would be coming at that point. You know what I mean?
Correct. The decision. ESPN. Let's go. 100%, Chris. Let's hope he's wearing orange and blue by then. But my final thoughts is the rant that I had earlier. It's going to be a very quick sentence. Let's have an offseason, an ending of an offseason where there's no doubt the Mets had a great offseason and go into a season with a confident roster, not a hopeful roster, confident roster. I want a no doubt offseason for once, right? I want a no doubt offseason where I don't want question marks in our rotation, at least at the top. I don't want question marks in the lineup. I want a no doubt offseason where I can say, damn, that was an A+ offseason. Could we get one of those? I would be very happy if they can do that at least once. And maybe, just maybe, we can go into a season saying, hey, we could be a 95 to 100 win team. No problem. Not hope that it happens. I want a confident roster going into 2025. During spring training, we could talk about that. I don't want question marks anymore. There's too many of those. We've had that too much. That's just my final thoughts with that. So make sure you subscribe to the channels, guys. Hit that like button. Again, hit that notification button, guys. We're going to go live at any moment. If Juan Soto signs tonight, tomorrow, watch parties, hot stoves, winter meeting specials, all that fun stuff over the next, handful of days. So if you hit that notification button, you could be relaxing, sitting down on the couch, drinking a beer. You're going to get that notification with Chris and me and everybody else that's going to go live if breaking news happen, guys. So with that said, thank you for tuning in to another Mets Hot Stove on the channels and on X. We will definitely see you tomorrow at some point with a watch party with Juan Soto. I'm going to try to get other people on just to pop in throughout the hours. All Mets YouTubers are obviously welcome. I'm going to send it to everybody, the link to everybody that I know that are Mets YouTubers through X. So let's get it done, guys. Let's go Mets. And we'll see you tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon with a Juan Soto watch party if he doesn't sign tonight. Have a good night, guys, and let's go Mets.
Go Mets.
City lights in in the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine.